Good afternoon. Special budget meeting, August 16th, 2017. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please rise with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, if we could have the roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Kimbenzi, Commissioner Conley,
Here.
Commissioner Frazier,
Here.
Commissioner Plurd,
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Baldini,
Here.
Mayor Campana.
Here. Someone want to make a motion for Commissioner Cambenzi? Commissioner Reynolds?
I move that we excuse Commissioner Kimbenzi as she's just running late. She should be here shortly.
Second somewhere? Commissioner Baldini?
Support.
All those in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed? That carries 6-0. We have the agenda in front of us. Someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Frazier,
I make a motion to approve the budget agenda as written.
second. Commissioner Reynolds,
Second.
all in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Carries 6-0. Announcements? I have none. Public comment? This is a chance for residents to address the commission. You have 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to address the commission at this point? I'm going to open public comment if anybody wishes to address us. Anybody? See none, we're going to close public comment. We're going to move to the consent agenda. We have one item on that. Is there a motion to approve that? A motion. Commissioner Conley.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a support somewhere? Commissioner Reynolds.
Second.
Discussion none. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed? It carries 6-0. We move to new business, which is our budget, which we all look forward to, and we have to do it. It's a very important part of the city. I'm going to let the city manager start us off. City manager, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to welcome the commission to your favorite time of year. Trust me, you have the easy part. The budget will be presented much in the same format as you experienced in the past. Gary will be leading most of the discussion. The schedule is pretty much laid out in front of you, and as you see, we'll be moving through various departments throughout today's activity. There are 3 other meetings following this one. Gary can explain the detail of those a little bit further, but usually on the last day, just as a reminder, is when we ask the commission to offer changes or input to anything that we may have provided. Of course, you can also interject as we proceed through the steps and offer any information or any ideas, changes that you might have as well. So if you don't do it now, it's likely that it'll end up in the final document. So it's probably best if you have an issue to deal with it through these sessions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
Thank you. As Mike said, this is the first of 4 scheduled budget sessions. We presented you with a 207-page document. This does not currently include the library budget. They will be presenting that once their board has approved their budget. So we should be receiving that this week. As soon as we do, we'll make sure you get a copy of that. This budget isn't just numbers. There's also some good narrative, particularly in the first few pages. If you haven't already, I would encourage everybody to review it. There's quite a bit of good information, particularly starting page 5 is the transmittal letter, and it just really summarizes the process we've been through, and it provides some summary of the numbers that we're about to review. This year will be no different. This is what I call the dog and pony show. This is where each department And usually middle managers will come before you and present their budgets. We encourage you to ask questions anytime you have. As Mike said, it's better to deal with it at the time rather than wait towards the end, but it's your prerogative. The budget is on the city's website, and these meetings are being televised live. So anybody listening at home, if you would like to see exactly what we're looking at, the budget is on the main page of the city's website. There's a link, and just mash on the link, and it'll take you to exactly what we're looking at here. So with that, we'll just go ahead and get started into the budget, and we would like Susan to provide a overall view of the wages and fringe benefits so that each department head doesn't have to do that each time.
Thank you. I did email this out to all the commissioners a little bit earlier, so you'd have a chance to review it. Rather than just reading all the items, I'll just kind of point out some of the changes or things you need to be aware of. The salaries and wages this year reflect a 2% contractual increase for all union employees except for 2 bargaining units. That's the supervisors and the police bargaining units. Their contracts expire the end of September, and we will be entering negotiations with them the next couple weeks. So as per our past practice, we don't budget any increase for those units that we're in negotiations with. The 2% also includes for management as well as in there. And the salaries and wages, it also includes overtime and shift differential, those types of additional expenses, benefit time conversion, so that's all of that wrapped into salaries and wages. The part-time wages this year have gone up. The state of Michigan back in 2014 put in a gradual increase to the minimum wage that was to take it up in steps to eventually $9.25 an hour. This January is the last of those automatic increases, so the minimum wage will become $9.25 an hour on January 1st, 2018. So all of the wages, part-time wages, have been increased to reflect that increase in the minimum wage. Longevity this year does reflect that department heads had a slight, and the middle managers had a slight bump in their longevity to make them coincide with what union employees were getting for a longevity bonus. Social Security and Medicare really is no different, other than the cap on wages has gone up to $130,500 this year. For our health insurance, the premium renewal came in quite a bit high, about 14% higher than we had hoped. The state hard cap only went up 3.3%. So we did make a couple changes to the underlying insurance plan. We went to the highest deductible plan we could buy, which was a $5,000 deductible. That lowered the premium a little bit. We also looked at, we used the seamless wrap to bring the benefit levels down to a deductible of like $250, $500 for core and buy-up employees, and we looked at the utilization of that, and we now have 4 years of experience with doing the seamless wrap. And we were very conservative when we started out, and we felt we could lower that percentage a little bit, and that helped lower the cost to the employees as well. And we also, yes?
What's a seamless wrap?
That's what we call it. Where we self-fund the difference between, when you buy an insurance plan, you're assuming that everyone is going to access their deductible 100%, and we know that's not true. So what we do is we say, we buy a $5,000 deductible, for example, but the employees have a $250 deductible. Anytime that employee exceeds that $250, we self-fund that out of the HRA instead of paying it to the insurance company. And that's been able to cut our costs dramatically.
Does that fall under the state cap?
Yes, it has to fall under the state cap. Now the employees are paying towards their insurance. They're paying about 10% of the premium cost right now, which is still better than the 20%, which is the other option if we don't use the hard caps. The other thing is we have started self-funding. We started this last year. This is our second year as self-funding our prescription drug program through CVS Caremark. That, again, has saved us tremendously on the cost of drugs. And this year, CVS has started doing some drug rebates to us. And we factored those rebates, very conservative estimate of what those rebates are going to be, and again, to help lower the cost to the employees. For retiree benefits, really, that's been very flat. We're not seeing an increase at all. We did tweak the drug portion for retirees under 65 to make it reflect what the active employees are paying, and that did save money there as well for both the employee and for the city, for those employees that we pay 100%. The Medicare Advantage plan renews on January 1st. They have a calendar year renewal. And that, we just received the renewal rates last week, and it's only going up 1%, which is good. It's very good. Under long-term disability insurance, this year I was asked to price out putting management on a LTD program. This was something that we had in the past. It was discontinued several years ago from management. Employees that are in the union, some of them have LTD, some don't, but all the defined benefit union employees have access to a disability retirement that the management and the defined contribution does not have. So this LTD would provide protection for those management that are in a defined contribution program. Workers' comp, our rates are our modifier. Our experience has been very good. We are now down to 0.77, which is based on the fact that we've had a very good last couple of years in terms of workers' comp injuries. So that's very good. Our workers' comp has actually gone down. And then MERS. Our MERS rates have gone up quite a bit, and that's mostly due to the experience rate study they did. And they do these every 5 years. This year, the two biggest contributors to the increase were they lowered their investment return expectation from 8% to 7.75. And they are also factoring in the mortality tables that show that employees are living longer, and therefore the costs are going up. So all of those things combined has led to, for 2017, our plan is shown at 59%. We were at 63. In response to that, some of the things that we've done is a few years ago we put in a plan for new hires that has got a lower benefit level. So all new hires go into that plan. Over time, that's going to reduce our unfunded liabilities. We've also asked employees to pay more, and all the bargaining units so far have agreed to go up to 6% to contribute to their plan. And in return for that, the city is pledging not to lower their contribution. Normally, when MERS sends you, this is what you need to pay this year to fund your plan, they take what the employees pay, and then that lowers the total that the employer has to pay. And we've asked them not to lower it when the employees have paid another 1%, not to lower the city's payment, so that we will be paying more than we were actually required to. That should help us reduce that unfunded accrued liability as well. We did get next year's actuarial already, and some of that is reflected in the, and plus the investments have done well in the past year. Our plan is going back up to 61% next year. So. The fire police pension, they are at 75% this year. They went up 1% from last year. Not a whole lot more to say about that. And is there any questions?
Question. You talked that we're self-funded on drugs. I did this some years ago in the school system. You do save money.
Yeah.
And the bigger your base, have we ever, and I mean, we could be, but what does the county do? I mean, is it?
The county's in a pool with some other communities. I don't know who else is in the pool with them. But we did look at that. We are still paying much less than we would be paying in the pool. We have very good experience in terms of our health claims.
And then with the market doing what it's doing this year, I mean, you know, at least on paper, it's in great shape. Are we gonna, will we see that next year, or will that take a couple of years to catch up with us on paper?
The MERS is, everything that we pay for this year is based on an evaluation for December 31st, 2015.
Okay.
So it will eventually show up in there. We're also still realizing the losses from 2008. Back when the Great Recession hit, MERS amortized that law, or smoothed it over 10 years, which is a really long time. So we still are having to realize some of that loss. They have now, with that experience study, they've changed that smoothing to 5 years, which is a little more realistic, I think, in terms of, but.
Okay, fine, thank you.
If we're self-funded, let's say if an employee or a family member were to go on expensive chemo, $10,000 a dose, do we pay it that year, or does that catch up with us the next year?
We pay it that year. And we do have stop loss, so I think it's anything over 50,000 is covered by insurance.
$50,000 aggregate liability?
Well, for one claim. We have a stop loss per claim, so any claim that exceeds 50,000, the stop loss insurance would kick in.
Okay. And what is with this coming year, we'll be at 59%. It seems to me the state would send a letter if you're at 60%. Are we
That we
are we
have
gonna
gotten
get
that letter, but we can base it on the newest valuation that we just got, which will be for next year, and we're at 61% coming next year.
So that saves us from being
So we don't,
under
yeah.
the
But
spotlight.
we're still reporting on the things that we have done to try to reduce those unfunded liabilities, so we are making those reports.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next, before we get into the non-departmental revenues, I just kind of like to point out a few things in the budget. Page 6, there's some information which is pretty important to this budget document. Number one is the City Commission recently approved a performance contract with Johnson Controls. That is not reflected in this budget. We don't have the information we need to fully incorporate it into the budget. So this budget is prepared, as business as usual, meaning we took the projects that we normally bond for, we put those in the budget, and we also put the bond proceeds in the budget. Now, once we get the information we need, we'll be presenting a budget amendment to fully reflect the Johnson Controls contract. But I just wanted to let everybody know, so far the Johnson Controls is not reflected in this budget document. Next off, just some stats. 1 mil of property tax basically equates to $663,000. This time last year it was about $683,000, so that is going down. And that's reflective of, tax tribunal settlements. As we settle those cases, that resets the tax base for those properties. And also we have some TIF revenues, particularly like the Smart Zone. Some of that is being siphoned off for specific economic development type activities. So we are seeing a little bit of a decrease in our tax revenue coming in. And because of Proposal A, makes it a little difficult to recover from that, because Proposal A says you can raise your taxable values at the lesser of inflation or 5%, and so far inflation is well below 5%. So it'd take us a while to recover from that, and as we do have more tax tribunal cases come through, and if we lose, those cases are settled, and that kind of resets the bar on that as well. In the utilities, 1% of stormwater rate increase is roughly $13,000. In the water fund, $44,500, sewer $55,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future budget session, but just stating off the bat, we're not recommending a rate increase at this time in any of the utilities. Part of the Johnson Controls contract was the automated meter infrastructure project, and we're hoping through that project we will see increase in revenue just because the meters will be more accurate. And then once that has started taking place, we have a rate analyst firm on standby ready to do a full analysis of our rate structure, and that will be presented at a later time as well. A few other things. Oh, yes, sir.
What kind of timeline do you foresee for the Johnson Controls amendment to the budget?
Just as soon as we can get it. It shouldn't be long once we get the full
Weeks,
number.
months?
I would say probably a couple of months at the most. That
Thank you.
would be the hope, anyway.
Thank you.
AMI is supposed to be done by the end of March. March of 2018.
Gary, when the 28 million that we're borrowing in effect, do we get that 28 million right away, or do we get it in, it's 2.5 years, do we get it quarterly, parts of it, or where does the money go? Do we carry it as revenue on one side of our books and then obviously liability on the other?
Correct. This is, even though it's not a bond issue, it'll work very similar to a bond issue. We did borrow a little over $26 million. That's being held in escrow, and the way the contract reads, there's a 50% upfront payment for their mobilization, and then it'll be progress billings from there. So once they exceed 50% completion, then we'll start releasing money from escrow to Johnson Controls. It's my understanding it's supposed to be a 2-year project, so they'll be paid out over 2 years. We should start seeing savings, as soon as these projects start, but it'll be 2 years before the project is done, and we'll start seeing this full-blown savings at that time.
The money is being held in escrow, and we get it up front, and it will begin to accrue interest, I'm assuming. Was that assumption of accrued interest built into the payback or the cost of the entire project, or?
Yes, everything was taken into consideration.
Okay.
And usually when you hold money in escrow, usually when we do a bond project, pretty much as soon as the money comes in, it's going out, and interest rates are so low, you don't collect a lot of money. But because this could be a 2-year payout, there should be a little bit there, but I don't think it'd be a sizable amount by any stretch. Yeah, every little bit helps. Every little bit
Live
helps.
on that, but
Yeah, it's pretty sad when I sit here talking like $28 million is chump change. But that's, directing you to some other pages. Page 10 shows the fund balance of each fund as of the last audit. Now, fund balance doesn't equate to cash, but this tells you how much fund balance we have and how much unassigned or unrestricted fund balance and retained earnings we have in each fund. Then that next page there's 3 different titles for it: future committed funds, the Swans list, or my preferred is the Sleeping Dragons list. These are the projects we haven't incorporated into the budget, but are out there, and at any point in time we may have to incorporate these into the budget. But this is to just to put it out there that we recognize these projects are there, but we aren't putting them into the budget at this time. Page 12 is the tranche list, and the good news is we have nothing that we tranched this year. So if the city commission decides to pull something out of the budget, we'll just add that to the tranche list. And then I will go to page 41, which is the non-departmental revenues. We did present a balanced budget, a true balanced budget in which revenue and expenditures equal in the general fund. And this was accomplished by, we're recommending the same millage rate as has been the past quite a few years, 14.9225 mills. I believe that started in fiscal year 2011, and we haven't raised since then. As I noticed previously, we are anticipating a slight dip in property taxes, and that's related to the tribunal cases and some of the economic development TIFs we have going on. The bit of good news is state revenue sharing on the constitutional part. The state is projecting for us a slight increase. We continue to not budget for the statutory part, which is the CVTRS, formerly known as EVIP. And so that could be an additional $357,000 to the budget, but we have not incorporated that into the FY18 budget. Of note is the PILT payment in lieu of taxes. There's about a $800,000 increase there, and a lot of that is due to the BLP project. What I will say about that is it was good to see the increase. The bad news is we needed all of the increase to balance the budget. Potential further bad news is BLP is talking about taking, I believe it's the Shires plant offline, which will decrease the PILT payment. So at least looks like this year we're going to have a one-time bump, but we're going to have to plan ahead to see exactly where that's going to go into the future. That's all I had on the non-departmental revenues. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Question,
on any of
the revenue sharing, the statutory part, not the constitutional, we've always listed it as zero to start, and usually it comes through anticipation. Have you talked to our lobbyists? What are they thinking? Or
Yeah, I'll let Mike speak, but I wanted to say too, the CVTRS portion, the reason we budget for that at zero is if we comply with the requirements, which aren't difficult requirements, but if we comply with their requirements, then we will get an additional $357,000. But the reason we budget that at zero, there's always the possibility we may not meet their requirements and we don't get that money. But I'll let Mike address that as well, if you want.
Yeah, all the information I have is that the revenue sharing will be consistent with years past. I haven't engaged the lobbyists per se on this particular issue, mostly because of what information I can gather from Gary and through his process. But I have no indication that it's going to be anything but what we anticipate. We just don't count on it, if that makes sense.
And the follow-up on PILT is at some point we have to have the discussion whether we're going to stick with the valuation payment or go to gross revenue, which we can do according to the charter.
Correct. There has been some interest in the past of discussing a different form of PILT, i.e. a percentage of gross revenue. However, given the new construction at the Board of Light and Power, I felt it prudent to see where the PILT plays out or how the PILT plays out. Excuse me. Even in this particular year, it hasn't been a full evaluation yet. The plant wasn't fully operable for 12 months, so I anticipate that PILT actually increasing for next year. And I guess I'd like to see what that PILT is, and then maybe compare it again to a gross revenue and see what benefits the city the most.
If I recall, we can change it yearly. I mean, not that we were going to, I mean, if we do assessed valuation now, and let's say they close the plant, it would behoove us then to go to gross sales.
Likely, yes, yes.
And we, it doesn't say much in the charter about it. It says we can do it. I mean, do we have to give them 6 months' notice, or?
Well, I think what our thoughts would be to come to an agreeable solution or system between us and the BLP. Like I said, there is interest. It's just something that we haven't put on the forefront, mostly because if I recall correctly, it would take a charter change to do that. Because if I recall correctly, the charter specifies the PILT as a method for payments to the city. And if we were to look at a gross or percent of gross revenue, it would take a charter adjustment. If I'm correct about that, Gary?
I thought the charter gave us the flexibility to do both. I'll stand. Let me go read it.
Well, I think maybe that's what you hoped for when you were on the Charter Commission, but I don't think it worked out that way.
What you may be thinking about, the PILT process is strictly defined in the charter, and that's how the city assessor does it, and it is quite the task, and I'm sure the city assessor would very much enjoy if we went to more of a gross revenue concept. But what you might be referring to, the city charter does also say the city commission by resolution can request 50% to the net income of the BLP. And history has said we have never done that, but it is in the charter. So if it's something you wanted to tackle, then you're certainly able to.
And we get in an argument over what is income. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Additionally, what is net?
Pardon me?
It's not gross revenues, it's net. So not only what is revenue, but what is net? Net of what?
Yeah,
So
but we
that'll
could-
be,
If we do the charter.
that'll be an argument for the future commission.
Okay, so that takes care of, oh, I'm sorry.
If you did it off of gross, there's really no way you can adjust gross.
Yeah, if we change the way we did PILT, we would want to do it based on gross. But the charter says you can also ask for 50% of their net income.
They can get rid of that real quick.
Yeah, there are ways, yes. As I say on live TV, yes. So barring any further questions on non-departmental revenues, and as we go through each department will report on their specific revenues. But we're ready to start the expenditure side, and that will be Mike presenting the city commission and the city manager's budget.
Well, last year at this time, I tried to eliminate a commissioner's position to save money, but that didn't go over very well, so I'm not going to try that again this year, but, and for those out there, I was kidding, okay, just so you know. On
City
page,
manager, I took that to heart.
yeah, okay. So, one of the normal procedures we do is when a position is vacated, we usually leave it vacated for about 6 months to enjoy the savings, so we can do that with a commissioner if you want.
60
But
days.
60 days, yeah, or 6 months, whatever. You can do that with the manager too, yeah. I'm sure Gary will come a lot cheaper than me. Page 50, departmental fact sheet, legislative. Excuse me, under revenue applicable to this account, and we only have two revenue sources. The first is fees, which is essentially what we charge if the mayor or pro tem were to conduct a marriage. It's budgeted at $100, which is, I believe, what we charge for one, Wendy. $50 for each. So often, if it's arranged through our office, we will take this process or continue or complete this procedure, but if mayor or pro tem are asked to do it outside of our office, it's sometimes missed by us, so there's no problem either way. But we have to have one source of revenue. So, and the next is the pass-through money that we essentially assist the local Native American tribes with some of their 2% money and how they expend it in the community. We pass it through the commission for approval. It comes through our accounting and goes out to the recipients through us. There's absolutely no benefit to the city financially. Authorized positions, we have, of course, 6 commissioners and 1 mayor. Of note is that the Local Officers Compensation Commission meets on August 17th, which is tomorrow, to determine whether or not there will be an increase in the salary for the mayor and pro tem. And I can't predict, but I can tell you that they are looking at a $200 per year commissioner increase and a $300 for the mayor. Other than that, the program statistics on the bottom of page 10. 24 regular commission meetings. 50. I'm sorry, page 50. 24 regular commission meetings, 5 special meetings, and then I see I'm lacking in work sessions for this year, so I've got to. That's just an estimate at the time that we printed this up, but I think by the end of the year, you guys will have a good year in work sessions. Any questions on that page? Okay, moving to page 51. Central Administrative Legislative Expenditures. Nothing really of major change, if any. Office supplies is staying the same. The technology fee is something that's addressed through our IT department. Transportation is a travel budget that we put together for the commission and administration when we attend business-related events, MML conference and such. Of course, the pass-through money is listed there. Printing and publishing is the same. Vehicle equipment is when we utilize a city car for travel. If you look at the notes at the bottom of the page, it explains each one of the things that I mentioned. It includes the, for example, 880, which is the Economic Development Promotions, includes Chamber of Commerce membership of $5,000, Superior Trade Zone membership of $10,000, which we are committed to. The lobbyist is $36,000 annually, and then the promotional items are things such as T-shirts, pins, and the such that we give away at various times during the year. Any questions on that page? Okay.
I got a question.
Okay.
Does it really cost $6,000 to get everybody down to Lansing in March for the Capitol Conference?
Yes. Where are you looking exactly?
Page 51 in the notes.
Okay. Yes. That's our anticipated cost for the 2018 Capitol Conference. Yes. It's an expensive venture.
Oh, thank you.
You guys are worth it. So. Yeah, the fall conference is even more expensive. Is that back at Mackinac Island again this year?
I'm not sure where it is next year. This year is Holland, but
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with just travel. There's travel reimbursements for personal vehicles and such, and then the hotels that usually are involved are, even though they may offer a special rate, are still
Oh, I'm
expensive.
sorry. I was thinking that was just the mileage, but it's
No.
it's the entire.
Yeah, it's everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wow,
Okay.
did I miss the limo?
No, no. Yeah. Okay, and then we also pay the membership fees. You know, under 960, we continue to participate in the Great Lakes Initiative and the Michigan Association of Mayors. Questions? Good. Please excuse my cough. Page 52.
Hey, Mike, I have a lingering question. When you're talking about salaries for the commissioners, have we ever been doing anything for the planning commission, or is that just idle talk?
Well, I don't think we've taken that on as an active effort. We've talked about it a lot, and I'm not sure if that would be something that would come through a compensation committee, or if it's something that we could certainly look into it.
Well, we've talked about it off and on.
Yes,
Tom?
I think that would require a charter amendment,
that could very well be too.
because I think it says in the charter that the committees are not paid. So, I mean, if we do, we may want to think about it, because we talked about it, yeah.
Charter.
Yeah, but I think it would
I think
require-
talking about it keeps them happy. It's a carrot, yeah. So, but yeah, no, that's
Check that out, but I think it's a charter requirement, yeah.
yeah, we'll make a note and I'll make sure I understand exactly what needs to be done.
They work hard, yes.
They do. Did you say something, Ron? Okay. Solitaire? Oh, okay. Okay, well, we may have an answer before this meeting's over on that question. Anything else on 51? Page 52, executive. Under revenues applicable, reimbursements are 0 for this year. Fixed charges are something that maybe Gary can answer if you have questions regarding that, but those are usually charges that are related to running the office through the internal service funds. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see in several of the general fund departments fixed charges. And this is our method of spreading out the costs to the non-general fund operations, in particular the utilities. One of the early GASB intentions was to show the true cost of providing a service for each thing that we do. So used to be a lot of these charges, like fringe benefits and like your water and sewer funds, were actually paid for out of the general fund. So GASB is trying to, like I said early on, wanted us to start showing the true cost of what it costs to run each department. And this is the way we do it for like the city manager, city attorney, finance, treasurer, HR, those kind of things. And they're usually based on formula. Like in finance, it's based on like the amount of checks and the number of checks that we do for each department. And like the city attorney and the city manager, they just provide an estimate of the time they spend in those areas. So it's really just based on estimates mostly. And there are different ways we can do it, but this is a method that I inherited close to 17 years ago, and it seems to work okay. But so anytime you see fixed charges, that's just our method of spreading out the overhead to those non-general fund departments.
Does assigning those charges also help as we establish fees to comply with the Bolt decision?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, by doing that, it does enter into the cost of providing a service, so in that way it does help, yes.
Okay, moving along to authorized positions. You'll note a difference in the way we record the city manager's salary. In years past, it was divided between executive and strategic development. I just didn't see any value in continuing it on paper that way, even though it still is part of my job to spend a significant amount of time on strategic development. For the sake of simplifying the budget, I just put myself all into one salary. After me, the executive assistant, which is Wendy, management analyst, Sean, and then the assistant city manager, Jen. You'll see I factored in a 2% raise for each this year in line with labor union contracts. With regard to the management analyst and the assistant city manager, they're also involved in planned step increases as well that are usually spread out over 5 years, the first 5 years of their employment, that coincide with their anniversaries in that position. So I will tell you that each one is well worth the money we spend on them. Program statistics, very similar to the commission. Once again, 2017 are estimated. As you can see, I attend some additional meetings that aren't reflected in the commission statistics. But any questions on page 52? Okay, moving on to page 53. Expenditures for the executive branch. Everything is pretty much consistent and the same. Much of it is based on numbers provided from the finance office. However, for example, 860, 101, 172, 860, transportation is documented at the bottom. The MML conferences, UP managers meetings, of which there are 2 a year, and then miscellaneous manager travel. 960 membership fees. I'm a member of the Marquette Economic Club, the UP Labor Management, and NIPSA training, which is the internal training mechanism that we have.
We have a substantial increase in technology fee. Just what are we doing?
I think Gary, I can answer that, but I think Gary's probably better at it.
Yeah. We have a technology fund, which is an internal service fund. And the idea is to capture the costs by charges to each user department. And Dan does quite a good job of keeping track of which areas, are, what piece of equipment is here and where they're providing maintenance and that kind of thing. So it's kind of the goal is to capture the full cost of operating the IT department, and he has a spreadsheet in which he calculates how that happens. And Dan will be presenting at the August 30th meeting. We can dive more into it at that time, but it is just a mechanism of recovering the costs for the IT operations.
We started this, was it last year or the year before, to start really tracking it, I think, and, yeah.
Yeah, it was last year that we started making some adjustments. In previous years, it had been spread out or dissipated or differently, and in my opinion, didn't offer a clear and accurate picture of the expenses per department, so we backtracked a little bit to a system that you actually see what the costs are related to each department. Okay. Any questions on 53?
Okay, if we can move along, the next three areas, the department is financial services, and the divisions within that are finance, treasurer, and assessing, and also utility billing. So the next three presentations will be under the umbrella of financial services, and we'll start on page 54, which is the fact sheet. The only revenue applicable to finance is the fixed charges, which we just discussed a little bit. And then we're showing that we have 3 authorized positions, myself, a staff accountant, and an accounts payable clerk. And then we're showing a few of the stats that we do each year. Page 55 are the numbers. It's showing a little bit of an increase over the FY17 budget, and that is largely due to the MERS. There was a $16,000 increase in the MERS contribution. Other than that, there was a slight increase in salary due to contractual wage increases. Other than that, the things that we can control, like the supplies and those kind of things, we have really kept as close as we can to previous years. Under the repair and maintenance, that's rental. Under the rental, the finance department is responsible for the postage machine and the folding machine, and that is just the cost to rent those particular items. And then under 801, professional and contractual, that is a lot of the audit fees and banking fees and those type of things. Do you have any specific questions?
So your revenue, you charge for your accounting services to the other departments?
Correct. To the particularly the utility funds, those are the big ones that we hit. But really, any non-general fund department, and that's what we'll see several other departments doing as well.
So you wouldn't necessarily charge like Parks and Rec department for the accounting that you do on their behalf?
Not in the general fund, but if it's outside the general fund, we do that.
Okay, thank you.
So if there aren't any further questions, I'll ask Mary, the city treasurer, to present her budget, which is page 56.
Good afternoon. Well,
I'm sorry, page 58. Page 58.
I have to say, my budget is actually pretty boring, pretty status quo. So I want to take the opportunity just to kind of say, it's been almost 3 years since I've been working as a treasurer for the city. And when I first came in here, I had an 80% turnover in my department. And you never know what you're going to get. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? What do I've got? I have to say, you have a very efficient, hardworking finance and treasury department working for you. I tell them every day they make my job easy. I'm very proud of them. So since I have a boring budget, let me give a shout out to them for all their work. So again, starting out with the fact sheet, as far as revenue applicable to our department, again, not exciting. We have mostly the fixed charges that come in that we charge. Gary's already addressed a lot of that. Probably the biggest change that we have for this fiscal year looking forward has to do with the restricted tickets and parking meter tickets. Police department will also probably talk to you about this, the same thing, because we share that revenue 50-50. When we have a parking meter attendant who's working full-time, we get some pretty good revenues off of having somebody working. In the past couple of years, I know we had some staff that was off and things like that, and we did see a decline in that revenue. We've got a new parking system coming online, hopefully by the end of the fiscal year, which is going to help us capture those ticket revenues. So I have budgeted a bit of an increase this year that we should be able to see from those revenues. Under my department, I've got 4 working for me. There's myself, my deputy, and I've got 2 cashiers that work 50% for me and 50% for the water sewer department. The clerks are entry-level positions, so whenever there's a posting or an opportunity for them to move up within the city, my department gets that that vacancy for a while, and you're going to see in my expense budget I've kind of addressed that situation a little bit. But again, I'm always proud when I can kick somebody out to another department because we've been hiring some really great clerks up front. So going to the expenditure side, which I believe is page 59. I know Susan has already addressed all of the salary and wage information, and we've already addressed the technology fee. Of the things I am proposing is a little bit of an increase to the postage. In the past, we have only been budgeting for what it costs for us to send out the tax bills. With the new parking system coming online, I've challenged the girls. You know, I want statements being sent out at least once a year. They've returned and said they want to do it twice a year. So I wanted to budget for a little bit more increase in that, hoping that the revenues we receive from those notifications will also increase the revenues. And then as I discussed with the changeover in my entry-level staff, I budgeted for 3 months of manpower or temporary labor to come in, something I haven't budgeted for in the past. Usually I had enough in the salaries and wages budget to kind of trump over that, but I wanted to make sure that those line items fell a little bit more accordingly. And then finally, a decrease to the training budget. I have passed my initial certification with the Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association, so now I and my deputy will be able to travel together, which means we only have to go once instead of twice. So that's about as exciting as this gets. So if you have any questions.
But we're really fun to be around. We just have boring jobs.
Boring budgets, fun department.
You could have an exciting year because with the increase in the meters, but that's right, they'll deal with the police department, won't they?
Yep.
You just collect, okay.
Yep, we're 50-50 with them, yeah. Yep, it's been quite the task.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the assessor. Is Miles here? Yep, last Miles will be on page 60.
I missed it. Why, why did the health insurance go up so much this year for this department?
A lot of that depends on marital status, and as Mary is indicating, the cashier's positions are kind of the low rung on the totem pole. So as we bring in new people, you could be replacing somebody who was single with somebody with full family coverage. So you're going to see some variances there.
Thank you.
We're on page 60. There's just 2 items under the revenue section for you. You can see there's a slight increase, about $400 in the fee portion. And the fines portion is actually, estimates have gone down $200 from the previous fiscal year. There are 3 people in the assessor's office. You can look at the salaries and costs there. Gary's covered the statistics as far as the taxable value goes. That's what you're mostly concerned about in the department is the taxable value, since that's where your revenues come from. Also, on the revenue section, if you want more of a breakdown, that correlates to page 21, and you can see where those small revenues are coming from. On page 61 are the expenditures for the department. There's a couple of items that have increased just slightly from the prior year, fiscal year. One of those is the office supplies. The costs just keep going up for that particular area. In the transportation area, we've increased that from 1,000 to 3,000. We anticipate some travel for Michigan Tax Tribunal cases in Lansing, as well as comparable sales research. So that's the estimated cost for doing that. And then last but not least is our printing cost go up, and also the newspaper cost for printing go up on an annual basis. So, and we have a number of Michigan Tax Tribunal cases that are pending, and we're continuing to work on those. So, if you have any questions, feel free to answer.
The assessor, no increase in salary. We've been looking at least 2% for everybody else. What's going on? Did you top out, or did you just say, oh, I don't need it?
That's not my department.
Miles is in a different situation than most people. He's really on a more of a contractual type basis. He's what used to be called a level 4 assessor. I don't know what the name is now, but that's the highest level you can have. So we're very lucky to have Miles, but he works for the city 4 days a week, 2 days in the office and 2 days from his home in Escanaba, because he travels from Escanaba when he's here. So he's a little bit different situation, and he's more on a contractual type basis, and that's when his salary can be determined at that time when the contract comes up.
Thank you.
Just a comment, observation. If you look at the total budget again, there's two significant increases, picking up on Commissioner Conley's observation earlier, in health insurance and MERS. Health insurance, 10,000, MERS, 16,000. You know, and nothing you can do about that. I mean, that's
correct. Yep. And I think you're going to see that pretty much throughout. Do you have any more questions for Miles?
No more questions.
Okay, thank you, Miles. Okay, next we're ready to move on to the city attorney, page 66.
I guess much like Miles, I'm under contract. There's no request in here for any additional compensation. It's the department of the city attorney, but really it's off-site. We have two attorneys primarily doing the work. You know, Suzanne Larson, and our two legal assistants do the bulk of the work for the city. I know the budget shows health insurance and fringes, but that doesn't. Those are from prior city attorneys. It has nothing to do with this, with us. Our contract is just a straight fee. I think, particularly this year, you know, a lot of what we've been doing, particularly with DLP and the property acquisitions. And as Susan mentioned, we settled 3 labor contracts in last year, and we've got 2 that are starting up right now, starting this month and next week. Doing a labor arbitration, a number of court cases involving ordinance violations and things like that. We've got one in the Court of Appeals right now on a zoning matter. So I'm open for questions.
I see you have 50,000 for attorney fees for tax tribunal. Pretty standard. Probably going to be every year.
Yeah, those are not I don't charge extra for tax tribunal work. Jack Van Covering is doing the tax tribunal work that I'm not doing. Certain cases he's handling, certain cases I'm handling, and as Miles indicated, some of the small claims that don't require an attorney he's doing. So there's a number of different ones. I will say this, the number of filings are down from what we've had in the past. We've probably got a handful right now. Hopefully that'll stay like that. I shouldn't have said it, huh? I think we have about 5 or 6 pending.
I just want to add that, you know, I joke with Ron quite often and take pokes at him, but he's worked very hard this last 12 months. I mean, I thought we were going to lose him a couple of times, but you know, there's been a lot going on, and you know, being someone who's been with the city when we've had contractual attorneys as opposed to in-house attorneys, I mean, this relationship has been nothing but productive, even compared to the internal attorney situation that we've had in the past. And you know, Ron has been pretty much all things to all departments, and you know, you see him once every 2 weeks, and in between, though, he and Suzanne, his assistant, are spread out pretty thin. I mean, each department has, believe it or not, some level of contact with the city attorney on a daily basis that requires actually quite a bit of work. And you know, I'm quite pleased. Not that I have any say in his reviews or anything, but I'm quite, you know, happy with his office and the way he's been performing. And on a serious note, I'm glad we have this relationship. So thank you, Ron.
If I could just add to that, it would be much different without Mike.
We planned this.
And he's an incredible person to work with and for, and with Jen and Wendy and that whole team, it couldn't be better. But as Mike said, I'm in contact with virtually every department every day on some legal matter. I mean, you don't see them because they won't come to your level, but there's always something.
I feel like I'm in the way here. It's like
I forgot my wallet.
It does sound like a mutual admiration society, but I do want to say, for the short time that I've been on the city commission, Ron, you are available all the time. You answer questions immediately when everybody puts one up to you. You have an answer right away. Gary, same thing, and the departments really do work very, very well. Same with all the departments that are here today. So I definitely appreciate that. I can get Mike's opinion whenever I need it, or assessment. I can get your opinion whenever I need it, and that's so important to us, for us to be able to do our jobs. You do supply exactly what we need. I would agree with everything that's been said, so I thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that comment. It really is a pleasure working for the commission. I mean, we're doing the city's work, and
Right.
that is very special for Suzanne and me both. It's different than, you know, we like representing private clients, but there's nothing like doing work for the people of the city. So it's a special privilege.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Next, we'll jump over 40 pages to page 106. This is liability property insurance. There's really not much on the fact sheet, page 106, so page 107 shows a little bit of the history. It'd be nice if this was the only amount that we paid for property insurance, but really page 107 is where we capture the part we can't classify for other departments or funds. Citywide, if you add up all the property insurance, it comes to just under $400,000 per year that we pay citywide. And like I said, this $82,000 here is just the part that isn't easily classified into specific areas. And we didn't go out for, we currently have with our insurance with MML/Meadowbrook. We didn't go out for bids this year. I think it was last year. Is Wendy? Was it last? Yeah, we went out for bid last year, and you know, we're still happy with the services that they're providing at the cost. So we didn't go out for bid this year. Any questions on insurance? If not, we'll move on to transfers out, page 108. Again, not much on the fact sheet there, but page 109. This is transfers out from the general fund to other funds. And this is, the general fund supports the operations of the major and local street funds and also the Lakeview Arena Fund. And prior to the past couple of years, also the marina funds. The marina funds we're projecting won't need a cash infusion from the general fund this year. Lakeview Arena Fund, the contribution is going down. It's still just over $200,000 per year, but it is actually decreasing, so a good job by the people in that operation. And the major and local street funds, we do collect Act 51 money from the state, but that, as you can see, it's not nearly enough to cover the full operations. And that typically holds steady each year. It can vary between each particular fund, the major and local street, but usually it's around $1.3, $1.4 million per year. And then the other transfers out go to the specific debt service funds, in which the general fund has a part of the payment for that. Yes, and Mike just pointed out to the Public Art Fund is a new one this year. We put in the $30,000 transfer. I know you've had a couple of work sessions on that, and we did plug that into the budget should you choose to go forward with that officially. And that's at $30,000 for this year, and that will be presented Monday night. More detail on that, I believe, next Monday night. Any questions on, yes?
Question, Gary, the Lakeview Arena Fund, which has always interested all of us, might we see, when you come through with the budget next year or the year after, because of some new energy equipment we put in there, that we would reduce this?
Yes, sir. Part of the Johnson Controls contract was a few projects out at Lakeview Arena, so we do hope to see that decrease, but we just don't have enough information to plug that into the budget at this time.
The other question is, Commissioner Cambenzi is here, and Kaufman Auditorium, and I don't want to speak for Sarah, but they're trying to alleviate some of the expenses, charging so much a ticket, right? And I'm out of my league, but I know that's always been talked about. And I know we've talked about saying, do we begin to assess tickets? And that money then would go straight to a Lakeview Arena Fund, like I think the Kaufman Fund. I don't know what success you're having there now or not, but it's, and not to do it here today, but something maybe we should begin to consider and look at.
Yeah, I've talked to staff about that, and you know, we've not really delved into it completely. We were letting this year's festival season play out, but you know, we were contemplating whether we should do a broad fee such as you describe, or maybe pick one or two events to experiment with it to see how it works. I mean, there's certain dynamics in working with these groups because they're the ones that collect or sell the tickets, and we'd have to have some arrangement to recover some of that money with them. So I think as we move forward, we will be having that discussion. I've also been waiting for I think you'll understand things to settle down a little bit in the community services department to take on a new challenge such as this. So we should be able to move forward with that. So
should we consider also, I mean, somebody, the last thing you need is to start running this out of the commission or the city manager's office, but start holding festivals or music concerts at the Lakeview Arena? Do we go to a private contractor?
Well, we've talked about the concerts actually, and quite honestly, with the casinos as competition, we don't stand much of a chance as far as really being attractive and making money. From what I learned, it's a difficult project to conduct as it is. However, when you have that kind of competition out there, it becomes more so. So we probably will not be looking at something like that, concerts or whatever, but certainly other forms of revenue as we just talked about.
Would age-appropriate concerts, i.e. college students?
Well, you know, I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I mean, they're a huge undertaking, and, you know, it's just something that I don't think our experience has been very profitable with, if you recall from the 80s and things of that nature, but I have had that conversation.
Gary or Mike, when you talk about Lakeview Arena and you talk about Johnson Controls, is there an idea when the Johnson Controls improvements for Lakeview Arena will be done? And the next part of my question is it wise to kind of wait till that's done and see what kind of return on investment we get before we look at changing anything, or you're already thinking about that?
Well, part of the timing of this whole project was try to get some of the equipment into Lakeview before this next year's ice season. Specifically the chillers and the compressors that make the ice. I learned through this process, for example, that our current equipment runs at 100% of the time. And there's no way to regulate that any differently. So the new equipment will not only be more efficient in itself, but more efficiently run. And part of our whole goal with the approval process was so that that particular item could be installed before next year's ice time. Still looking at that timetable. I haven't received any kind of a different report. The same situation also applies, for example, to the heating systems in City Hall. You know, we wanted to try to get ahead of this upcoming season to take advantage of this season as opposed to waiting till next year and losing that savings. So I think there will be a considerable amount of electrical savings, for example, with the new equipment at Lakeview that compile with some roof repairs that have been, I'm sure, causing some serious heat loss and things of that nature. So
really next year's budget time is when we're really going to get a look at where we're at with this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. If the engineering study is accurate, which we think it is, it should be significant. So thank you.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Kembitz.
Just a thought on the dollar per ticket. The way we sold it, because at first a lot of the groups that rented there said, oh, we don't want to pay anymore, we don't want to contribute to this, but we set that dollar per ticket up specifically for equipment, and it was equipment that user groups wanted. And after the first year, once they saw us buying equipment they wanted, whether it was a stage or a pavilion or more electrical outlets, whatever it was that helped them have a better performance there, and they're fine with it. And we've probably saved at least $100,000 at this point from being taken from the general fund, which to me always competes with teachers' education and all of that. So it's a win-win, and it's actually catching us up quicker than if I had to wait and go to the board every year. So maybe with staff, it might even be a way to sell it to them too, because now I have an extra pot of money.
I just thought of one other thing, and one of the things we do run into under that scenario is several of our events are nonprofit fundraising type events where all of the money goes back into the community in one form or another. So we have to take a serious look at, for example, that scenario. So thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
I just want to say that most of our groups are nonprofits. Symphony, yeah. And honestly, again, once they see that we're improving the place that they hold their event that's, successful, it honestly has been wonderful, so.
We'll take a serious look at it. I won't ignore it, at least until you're done.
Go back to who's ever in charge of the concert days in the 80s and early 90s. Lakeview was a great event place back then. I mean, we had lots of good concerts. I know Rolling Stones and the Beatles aren't touring anymore for Tom, but I mean, we used to have lots of good concerts back then. Go back to who's ever in charge back then and have them make some phone calls. I know Barrie Event Center is open now. That takes a little bit of the pull away, and they'll have concerts everywhere else. But get a hold of whoever's doing the park, the band stuff back then. Have them do it again.
Well, we won't need to meet Monday night. We're already having all of that discussion, I guess. Any more questions on that? Okay. Next, we're ready to move on. I know it's everybody's favorite topic, the debt service. The easiest way to present this is to go to page 14. And if your book is like mine, there's a convenient page hole punch right in the middle of the 14. So it's actually a non-numbered page, but it is page 14. And also the next two pages too. Page 14 shows all of the debt the city currently has all on one page. And then page 15 shows the debts, that same debt service, but that is for the governmental funds portion. And then the page after that shows that debt that isn't a governmental fund or non-governmental funds. So pages 15 and 16, if you added those two together, would come up to page 14. Like I said, this is the debt we currently have on the books. Next, a week from today, we're going to be closing on the FY17 CIP bond issue. September 28th, we're currently scheduled to close on the Peter White Public Library bond issue, which was just recently approved by the voters. And we don't have a specific deadline yet, but we still have the phase 2 of the DLP brownfield bond, which is for the road and infrastructure part. So that'll probably be, my guess right now is probably early October for that. So we'll have those 3 that will be added to this list once we issue the bonds. On the good news, for the bond issue I was just talking about, the 2017 bond, we did get Standard & Poor's did reconfirm our AA credit rating, and the bonds were priced to be an average interest rate of 2.47% over the life of the bonds. So that was very good news. Even better news was we're refunding a 2009 bond issue. We were originally reporting there would be $172,000 in savings. After the pricing, it's now going to be $253,000 in savings. So that just continues to show the bond world still loves Marquette, and it's, I hate saying we have to go into debt to find that out, but if we're going to issue bonds for these type of activities, now's the time to be doing it for us. I really don't have anything else to say on the bonds. Yes, sir.
Gary, first of all, I like the presentation by separating the bonds that we pay off with our own money out of a general fund, in effect, and the bonds that we're paying off from, like the library fund, that's committed. So it helps break that out. I think we're all aware that the Mining Journal editorialized about our debt, and I think Dave and I have briefly had a chat that we should maybe editorialize back that, we are always concerned. I think we always ask that question, but we're not at a point of disaster. I think I feel we're in pretty good shape. I mean, some of the road projects are Lundin funds, there's a designated, the library fund, some of the brownfield obviously comes because the taxes come back and rotate there. I mean, we always got to be sensitive and aware, but the bond rates right now are just, wow. I mean, we're borrowing money at 2.47 on the bond, and on the other ones, 2.8. I think maybe as commissioners, we should have special privileges to, slap a loan on there or or something, you know, to get a little money. It's probably not legal, huh? But I like the way you present this, and it does help break it down. I mean, the water sewer fund helped pay for those things and so on and so forth. So it's a good presentation of where the money that we borrowed, where we're getting the revenue to pay it. So, and you always got to be sensitive to it, but it's good. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'll take this opportunity just to help you editorialize a little bit. You know, all of the, other than our annual bond debt that we normally would do for road projects or whatever under our normal capital improvement plan, you know, all the additional debt that we've added on, and I agree it's been significant, it was all based on a recognized funding source. So even though we have added debt, which Gary and I talk about frequently, again, I'll tell you, you know, Gary's not a debt guy, not at all. So, you know, we truly understand that, you know, going forward, especially from this year, you know, our debt needs to be something to take a serious look at. For example, we didn't anticipate at the time that we committed to the Duke Life Point brownfield debt, the JCI project. That was an opportunity that presented itself, and we took advantage of it. However, even in that example, the revenue to pay for that debt was recognized well in advance of us assuming the debt. In other words, I don't think either one of us would have agreed to that amount of debt if we didn't have some way of paying it back, other than hoping that tax revenues would increase and, you know, hoping that We Energies wouldn't leave and things like that. So, you know, we took on that debt knowing that we had a relatively secure funding source, as with the DLP, because of the brownfield projects. And you mentioned, Commissioner Baldini, the Lundin road funding commitment to Wright Street. I mean, for Wright Street was in need of repair, serious repair, especially west of Lincoln. And we actually had the conversation last year of, do we fix it on a temporary basis, or we just go all in and fix the whole darn road and take care of it with the Lundin funding, and we opted for that. Not only to take advantage of the pricing that's today's dollars as opposed to future dollars, but you know, to provide a nice road to the community. You know, I mean, people tend to forget that aspect of what we do when we spend this kind of money, is that we're providing something for the citizens, whether they live in the city or not, that's usable, up to date, and things of that nature. And you know, our philosophy is, or at least my position is, that, you know, these improvements, I want them to be realized by the people that are not only living today, but living 20 years from now in Marquette. And I really don't want to set some of these expenses on future generations if I don't have to. If we can take care of it now and actually have the money to pay for it, well, we're going to do that. But we certainly understand the debt picture, and I think Gary, about a week ago, tried to talk me out of spending any more money this year, but I told him no. So we'll think about it next year.
Gary, what was the bond interest rate again that you quoted?
2.47%.
Congratulations, great job. I don't know how you can get a lower interest rate than that. And it really does speak to the job that your department is doing and what the city of Marquette is doing overall.
Yeah, this is truly a team effort. It's not anything one specific person does, but the word gets back to me. The bond people, they like what the city is doing, and a lot of that goes to the city commission. I mean, pat yourself on the back. They truly like the direction that we're going in, and even though we do have a lot of debt, they see what we're trying to do, that we're using it mostly for economic development type activities, and you know, that carries a lot of weight too. So Okay, thank you. That wraps up the central administration part. So now we'll go to part of administrative services with Susan and her group. Dan, who is usually a part of this, the IT, he'll actually be presenting August 30th due to a vacation.
Ask Max to move the camera so I can have my chocolate bar.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start out by thanking you for all your support and saying that it's been a busy year with elections. We can start on page 56. Under revenue applicable to this account, you'll see what's proposed is actually less than the estimated for this year, and that's due to a proposal that I'd like to make regarding business license fees. So if I can refer you back to page 24 also. You can see that I've made some changes with our mobile food vendor item. And in between trying to balance costs and monitor questions and try to put everything on a level playing field, I'd like to propose changing the $1,200 fee for these trucks to an even $400, $430 across the board. So we would still have them follow all our rules, regulations, and places they could vend, but anyone in the city who wanted to vend, as long as they had all their inspections and followed all the rules, we would only charge them $430. So some of that could be a decrease in revenue on our part, but then again, it might attract more vendors into the city because we wouldn't be limiting them to, you can only park on private property, so you have to have all of these permission slips into us, or you can pay the $1,200 and park pretty much anywhere in the city. It would take less monitoring on staff time. It would take less monitoring on my staff and the police department. And we'd like to just try to open it up to encourage vendors that for a lot lower fee, we might be able to get a few more people interested. So it probably, for this next year, our business license year starts on May 1st, so anyone that has a license now would not have to get a license until next year. So if we get a few more vendors, it would be great, but they would still have to follow all the rules and regulations. The other thing that we did was on the hawker peddler side, we took out all the not using motor vehicle per year. We would only have a per year and a per day fee and just a plain hawker peddler. So everything that is food related would move into the food vendor, food truck area. Everything else, best example is somebody comes into town when it's homecoming week for Northern and they want to sell t-shirts on the corner or at the farmer's market. They'd be able to still vend because it's a tangible product, and we would charge them a daily or a yearly fee just under the hawker peddler. So those are my two major proposals in the fees. I think if we end up with a little bit lower revenue this next year, it'll probably level itself out or be above if we can attract the right vendors and get them to follow the rules. Authorized positions, again back under clerks on page 56. Myself, my deputy city clerk, and an administrative assistant. Myself and the deputy are still under our step wages, and Susan covered that under wages. Program statistics, we've pretty much remained the same except for legal notices and recording deeds easements, because we've acquired more property, had more public hearings, and that will follow every time we have more activity in the city. Those fees and numbers will increase. Thank you. Oh, I do have it. Okay, little disorganized, sorry. The general expenditures of the clerk, page 57, are pretty much standard operating costs, vehicle equipment and related. We take care of the R2D2, the annual records destruction program in the city. We still use Lake State Industries to help recycle and reuse. So we do have a bit of fees incurred with them, and our Public Works Department does help out also. That we're going to continue to do that. It seemed productive on all ends. 215,900 publishing of city notices. That's an increase. That will always probably be an increase until we can ever go to just publishing on our website or on our channel. Equipment charges, again, related to R2D2. This budget is pretty static, office supplies and the like. Have any questions?
A couple people asked about the, excuse me, the ice cream carts. Is that part of the, that would fall under like a mobile food truck, or just like if it's like, just like ice cream bars and stuff in a, you know, a little bicycle cart? Would that, what would that fall under?
It's actually, it's under the mobile food vending, but we have an item for carts. So
Okay.
it's non-motorized. It's just a different fee.
So it's different, it wouldn't be the 400 or 50, it'd be like a
No.
couple
it's an
$100 or
itemized
whatever
fee.
it would be.
Yeah, the mobile food vending trucks,
Okay,
it's anything motorized.
okay.
We have a breakdown for if it's not motorized.
So if it's like a bicycle cart, like you said, like with the little fridge on it or whatever, that'd be fine. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Food trucks do we have? Approximately.
Right now, we have four, and four that are paying fees. There's also one that falls under the veterans exemption that we have. So he's supposed to come in, fill out all the paperwork, file everything with us. But as far as paying the fee, he falls under the veterans exemption.
I recently attended a party at somebody's house, and they had hired one of the trucks to come, and truck provided the food, which I thought, oh, was clever.
Yeah, I don't think they're going away, so,
No, I
you
don't
know,
think so either.
we're trying to encourage it. Maybe we can get a little more attention to filling the paperwork out properly, that's a lot of our time, is all the paperwork we have to route to departments. We do checks on them. Our police department enforces where they're parked or where they're not supposed to park. So maybe if we put a better fee out there, they'll put a better feeling back to us. Bless you. Any further questions?
There have been new requests by new vendors that you're aware of? Nobody new wants to come in?
No, not that I've known. We have a few inquiries at the beginning of summer, but nobody knew that would be solid.
I just think we're going really well. Have there been any problems with where they park or police problems?
Minimal. I think I recall one recent concern, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be handled. Other than that, no.
I think you're good for the city. People like to see them. Food's good.
Yeah. Well, this particular fee schedule will bring us more in line with the Bolt decision. You know, our first couple of years, we set fees based on other examples and things of that nature. But after doing this for our second summer, Chris did a nice job in actually realizing what it costs, as did the staff, as actually putting the fee at or near the actual cost of our processing. So this is a lot fairer fee for the users.
Is there some way you're going to compensate them, did you say? I mean, the guys have been paying $1,200 or whatever it was. Now it says they're paying $430. It's a big drop. I'd say, hey, well, what happened? But
We're hoping nobody says that, but you.
You hear somebody saying at public comment, hey, you guys finally listened to us and dropped the fees.
Well, and that's
you're
it.
going to say you've been overcharging me, is what you're going to say.
Well, yeah.
Well, in monitoring everything, it all kind of shakes out in the end. There was a lot of hand-holding and a lot of monitoring and communication by the manager's office, my office, police department, to get it off the ground. So we're more stable with what we're doing now, and it's not so much of a
That makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Okay. But, Pete, you had a question?
No question, but you know, the food vending is a good idea because I've heard from the people that run the food fest, it's not a bad idea if we just get rid of that. I mean, I know it's expensive for the restaurants to put up a tent down there and do all the processing for the food. I've heard many people say just park a bunch of food trucks down there and, you know, for all the festivals we have down there, park a food truck down there and call it good. You know, they have all the supplies, and if we get more food trucks, by the way, you're lowering the fees. Wouldn't be a bad idea because people say, you know, I know a friend of mine runs a restaurant. He said it's hard. You know, he said, why? People ask him, why don't you do it? He said, well, it's expensive for me to get people down there and then run it. So it'd be a bad idea. Maybe we get more people interested in it. Go for it.
I think what's good about it is it might encourage further development. I think, isn't
Exactly.
the blue truck gonna looking at opening up a brick and mortar? Huh? Yeah, I mean, so, you know, maybe that's progresses things.
And we've also talked a little bit with a brick and mortar who wants to start a truck.
Oh,
Has been talking about it, but it was kind of out of their price range with their business right now. So maybe this would encourage a few more of those.
sure. So, good, good. Good.
With that, then, I'll go on to 262, elections. Elections basically isn't a moneymaker, so we have no revenue, no reimbursements in this time period. We did last year with the presidential primary. That was reimbursed to us, so that's why you see in 2016 actual, there was a reimbursement. Authorized positions, we have a number of election inspectors that we hire for each election. That number fluctuates. We also have 2 temporary office aides in the office that help as we are going right back into another election period. We have chairs and co-chairs for each of the 7 precincts. That's detailed and authorized. And then our receiving board is basically our canvas board and required by the state. Program statistics, total registered voters, 13,584. That is up just a little bit, but we're always excited to see more people registered in the city. Our Our election board meetings have gone up a little bit because we've had 3 and 4 elections in the last time period. You can see the same with our precinct workers and the election turnouts. We did move our precincts for this August election. So we now have 3 precincts in the Baraga Gym downstairs, 1 precinct at the new city, service center, and then 3 precincts at the Y. It did work out fairly well for handling the volume, and we were quite busy. We were at 22% for this election, where we would generally expect 14, 15%. So it was busy, and it was a real test of our new equipment. The state still has a few bugs to work out, but as far as our space limitations and rerouting those precincts, we might have to tweak some equipment here and there, but it worked out well. We heard generally good comments.
Question. It's been a number of years since we've moved the precinct lines, hasn't it?
That happens in a census year.
Yeah, census year, but, I mean, so we haven't done it in 20 years, have we?
We have not. The numbers haven't really changed. In the west side, north and west side, that, with those places expanding, you can have so many registered voters in a precinct before you have to change those lines. And then, again, you only change them with an even every 10 years.
I probably won't be here, but it's 2020 census. And I think that somebody should be looked at that point because of reapportionment for county commissioners' districts. 50% of the population of this county is in the 2 townships in the city. And I get in trouble for saying this, but the county commission should reflect that, but.
It was looked at a few years ago and tried to get a few changes through. And Dave Blue at the time stepped in and equalized it, because you have to go according to Michigan election law, and it was a little bit of a conflict.
You don't take on the fight.
We're looking at 2020. So under expenditures, again, 262,702, election workers are considered workers of the city, not independent contractors, according to Department of Treasury, so they fall under this line item. Election supplies, they're pretty standard for this type of election. We pay our election board. We've done that forever. And my only large change in this budget is we used to pay for coding of our tabulators, $1,940 for each unit. We got new election equipment, and all of a sudden I went, wait a minute. That increased to $2,200, $2,240 actually. So we got brand new equipment that was paid for partially by the state, partially by federal funds, and then the vendor agreed to not charge us a maintenance fee and zero out their costs for 5 years, which was absolutely great. But that vendor is the one who codes our cards and kicked up each of those costs. So that was kind of out of our hands. But they're a great vendor. They're here on election day. They do provide a really good service. So pretty much everything else in there is a standard. Rental and vehicle rental we have are all related to setup, tear down, renting facilities, that sort of thing.
you don't have any questions, we can move on to Susan.
Thank you.
This would be page 68.
I'll start with the fees portion under the revenue. Really, the only fees we collect are due to COBRA, which is the health insurance that employees that leave the city are entitled to. As part of that, if the employee who's leaving pays the full premium, but we also charge 2% admin fee. That 2% is the only fees that we collect. In the past, it's really been negligible to nothing, especially once the Affordable Care Act was passed. However, now I'm finding that employees are taking COBRA rather than, because they don't know what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act and whether that's going to be available to them, and the costs have increased. So we're seeing more and more people when they leave the city take the COBRA. That's about it for fees. Human Resources consists of 3 positions, myself, payroll clerk, and the HR benefits and coordinator. Some of the statistics, we average about 175 full-time employees, and that's been very stable over the past at least 10 years. Our full-time equivalents, which include our part-time and seasonal employees, has gone up a little bit. That's because the addition of, like, Clark Park, we've had to hire more lifeguards and more staff to do that as we add parks and other facilities. Health insurance costs continue to go up, but really we're pretty much held to the caps that the state sets. So our costs have gone up about 3.3%, which was the cap. Retiree costs at this point are not regulated by the state. They're not part of that PA 152 hard cap. But because we have discontinued this as a benefit to new hires, you're going to see that number continue to go down. We've also put in a lot of cost-saving measures to reduce the cost of retiree health insurance to the city. The MERS costs have continued to climb. Again, we've kind of touched on that in my previous presentation. A lot of that has had to do with the assumption changes that were made by MERS as a result of their 5-year experience study, and the fact that we are still recognizing losses from 2008. The police fire retirement system, we just got that valuation in, and that has gone up a little bit. Not as significantly as the MERS. Any questions on that?
Drug testing, is that for all employees?
All full-time employees.
All full-time employees, it's a random thing? Okay.
Well, it's not random. We tell them it's part of their
Yeah.
conditional offer when we hire them.
Do the police and fire do drug testing also? And they do it in their own budget
No, that's under my budget, but for the new hires.
for the new hires?
Yeah, and then also with police, they have a psychological testing, and fire, they do psychological testing of that. That's required by MCOLs as a part of the hiring process.
Which I wouldn't have passed.
They grandfathered you in.
I would have passed it 40 years ago.
Retroactive, okay.
Interestingly enough, you don't need one to work in a prison.
Really?
I figure you're already crazy.
Who's running the prison?
If there are no other questions on that, we can go to page 69. There's really not a whole lot here. We've got office supplies, really no increase there. Postage is actually going down. We're doing more and more. We used to send out paper rejection letters with every opening. We're able to do it through emails rather than mailing out a lot of letters. That saved a lot of money. Professional contractual is where we budget for the HRA seamless wrap. There's an administrative fee of about $500 for that. I spend about $2,000 a year on professional testing for a lot of our positions and promotions. And I've got $6,000 budgeted for arbitrations. We do have an arbitration coming up in January. Physicals and advertising, I know approximately how many people are eligible to retire and how many I think will actually retire. And then we have a lot of advertising with the seasonal positions. And some positions, there's a lot of high turnover, such as our homemaker aides. So budget for advertising and for physicals, pre-employment physicals and drug screens. We're doing a lot less advertising in the mining journal. We're finding fewer and fewer people use that as a resource for job hunting. Every time we have a position open, we do ask them where they saw the ad or how did they find out about the position, so we're tracking where people are actually looking. And it's more and more on Facebook and Michigan Works, Michigan Works, and our city website. It's actually much higher than the Mining Journal, very few from the Mining Journal anymore. Membership fees, there's for my membership and several professional organizations. And then we have employee assistance program that is through North Star. It's a service $30 an employee per month, and it provides free counseling to employees and their family members for all kinds of personal issues they may have.
How much do we use that?
I would say we generally have about 29 cases open each quarter. Each quarter. So about 100, yeah. And keep in mind that can be the child of an employee or spouse, as well as just the employee themselves.
Is it true, Susan, that those cases may be closed just as quickly?
A lot of times they are, yeah. Right. Right. Any questions?
If not,
Okay, thank you, Susan. Susan will be back with Dan August 30th. Dan is it his daughter's getting married?
His daughter's wedding
Yes.
in Jamaica.
Yeah, so that's good news for Dan. So. Next up is Fire Chief Ian Davis to present his section.
Good afternoon, almost good evening. If we want to start on page 77. Applicable revenues. The major change every year is the fire protection money from the state, and we really don't know what that is until we get it. This last year, it did go up to just under 210,000, so I adjusted our expected for this year based on that, but that's a wild guess. It's really up to them as to what they set it at. So that definitely isn't a hard number. Everything else is basically in line with what it fluctuates a little bit, but it's tends to be the same. There's not a lot of change there. Authorized positions after that, if you have any questions. We did separate that out this year. Some of the positions have paramedics in those positions, so we had to separate out the pay because they were like where we have 2 engineers and then we have 4 engineers that are also medics. So we had to separate those out because they do get paid differently because of that extra duty. Page 78 and 79 are program statistics. If you have any questions there.
Yeah, under your fees for the fire department.
Oh, sorry.
Do you ever get paid by insurance companies when you go on call? I mean, some communities charge for
We don't.
first call.
Yeah, we don't charge residents at all for fire calls.
You ever looked into that? Do you ever look into that? Because I think, like, as I look at my insurance company, it says it would pay so much per call.
Yeah, we never have something we could look at. We generally just don't charge residents for fire service at all. It's paid by their taxes to the city, so we haven't looked into that, no.
Might be leaving money on the table just because it's there in your insurance. I mean, it might be, I don't know how you phrase that so that you don't you don't want to send somebody who doesn't have insurance a bill, but if my insurance company would pay for it, I wouldn't mind it going to the city.
Can look into it.
Good.
So in all your runs, you don't charge the resident?
No.
Or is-
Yeah, the only time we would end up charging for something if it was on purpose. We'll charge, like, you know, if someone continually has false alarms on their alarm system, after a certain amount of time, we tell them, if you don't fix this and we have to keep responding, we're going to charge you. But that's more just a behavioral thing, trying to get them to change what they're doing.
It works.
It does. Yeah, we generally don't charge for it, but the threat's there because it is in the fee schedule that we can do that. But generally, no, we don't charge residents for calls.
I was just going to add that, you know, there's been a national conversation over the last decade or so about, including law enforcement, charging for calls for service or responding to accidents and things of that nature. However, it's always been our position that, you know, we're an emergency service and, you know, we're paid for by the taxpayers and we just didn't want to get into that billing or charging because there's quite an additional expense there to put in a billing process. And we wanted to encourage people to call us instead of not calling us because there might be a fee or whatever attached to it. So we felt it more prudent just to stay away from the fees.
Any other questions on 77?
Can just to kind of continue with that, are we talking about like a reimbursement for, being at the scene of an accident and transporting someone, or?
We don't transport.
Right. I just saw that the township was actually, they bought an ambulance.
Yeah.
And so they said there's quite a bit of money to,
Could I
for
speak?
reimbursement.
Could
I
I
mean,
s-
that's, I think what they said.
They hope to, well, Ian knows this.
Yeah, basically, you know, they can then charge for the transport, but overall, the transport business isn't a money-making opportunity. There really isn't a lot of money to be made. Most people are happy to be revenue neutral on ambulance transport. There's no other questions. Move on to page 78 and 79, which are program statistics. With that, if you just have any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer them.
Catching up to the police department.
Idle talk that I've heard, it seems like whenever there's somebody goes down at a restaurant, heart attack, whatever, upset stomach, whatever, they call, the fire truck shows up. Along with, do they get EMS from the hospital also? Do they call both?
Generally. No.
I mean, isn't it a big cost to send out the truck, the fire truck?
Well, there's a cost on anything that we send out, but we're here to provide a service for the residents. It's part of that.
Could you have a smaller truck? Or,
We have looked into that. In some departments, if they're large enough, they can run what's called an echo unit, which is like a Suburban, and they'll just run a two-man paramedic team. The problem with that is we don't have the staffing. We would actually have to increase staffing to be able to do that because as it is now, we have a 6-man minimum manning per day. And so what you would end up doing is have the fire truck and then the echo unit chasing the fire truck because we can't split our units up. We don't have enough people to split up what we're doing. So, because basically if we go out on a medical call and then get a structure fire call, everyone has to be on the fire truck to go to that, and you can't have two guys off doing something else. We just don't have the staffing to try to do that. We did look into it, to see if there was any way to get some cost savings and not put so many miles on the fire trucks for EMS calls, and there's just really no way around it unless we increase staffing, which kind of defeats the purpose.
You don't have a big enough service area is part of the problem.
Part of it also. If we had a bigger service area, we could afford more staff and we'd be able to run a little cheaper per call. But unfortunately, if we, with the size of the city and the amount of calls that we get for service, if we increase staff, it's gonna cost more than what we would save by going to a smaller vehicle and maintenance, things like that.
What do you do if someone goes down and then you get a fire call? Can you get that person down?
No, we would call people back in. It's just it slows down the response then on that next call. But no, we don't.
Anyway, right?
Yeah, it just depends on the timing, you know, on,
I'm sure it doesn't happen. What?
If I call, if I'm in a restaurant, something happens and I call 911, who do they call? They call the hospital? If I say somebody is passed out in the restaurant or whatever, what do they do?
they're gonna call, if it's within the city of Marquette, they're gonna call us and they're gonna call the UP Health Systems EMS also.
Rick, you had a question?
Yeah, well, actually not a question, a comment. Is it fair to say, Chief, that when there's some kind of crisis, no matter what it is, the first thing that people think about is the fire department? And I'm sure that you route people sometimes, when that's not a fire department issue, call maybe another city department or somebody else that does it. I'm sure Captain Laura knows if the fire department doesn't get it, the police department gets it. And you have to do the same thing. Sometimes it's just not a police issue, but people think in terms of, and probably because they've seen it 100 times in the movies, call the fire department. And then you have to route people around. But sometimes you have to respond. You just have to. So.
Good.
Okay, next page is 80. Major changes here, or I guess changes from last year. Line 740 on operating supplies, above what we normally use for our day-to-day operating. We need to purchase new extrication equipment. That's the jaws of life, hydraulic cutters, spreaders, ram, and also a portable power plant to run those. They generally run about 15 years in their service life, and we're at 18 years right now. We ran into a problem this spring where our cutters broke. We sent them in and they're old enough that they couldn't find parts, so we didn't have cutters for 2 months. And then we do have a backup pair, those broke. And so we were down to hand tools for cutting into cars, which obviously isn't ideal for us and it's not ideal for the people that are in the car. So we do need to replace that equipment. Also, we're looking at tablets, computer tablets for the frontline pumpers, and then one for the rental inspectors and one for the fire inspector. And then also the records management software to go with it, and also on-scene software for the trucks. That'll do several things. With the rental inspectors, especially with the short-term rentals being added onto it, we're trying to eliminate the handwritten reports as much as we can. This would speed up the process, make it more efficient, allow them to do their job better, and it's easier than to track also who's been contacted, where they are in the process, everything else. It's all tracked through the software. On the records management side for the city, right now everything we have is done on paper in the department. We have some homemade spreadsheets on Excel that we use for things, but nothing works together, and it's really hard to keep track of everything. On the response side, on the fire trucks, the software that we're looking at, instead of just getting paged out and listening to where we're going over a speaker system from central dispatch, it'll automatically go straight to the tablets, open up the address right on the tablets for us, and then what it'll allow us to do, it's called Command Scope. And once they pull it up, we can have all of our GIS information overlaid on the picture of the building. So we'll have everything from any hazards we've noted in the field beforehand on our pre-fire plans will be on that. We'll have what hydrants are there, the size of the mains, what kind of water we're looking at. Basically any information that we usually spend thousands of hours updating our pre-fire plans with the businesses, and then they're kept in a file cabinet. We don't have access to them on scene. So we don't have that information up front where we need it, and this would allow us to do that. One interesting thing with that command scope program, if a school, NMU, or a business, anyone that has cameras in them, if they sign on, when we get there, we have access, real-time access to their surveillance systems, so we can see what's going on in the building as we're pulling up. And depending on the call, the other nice thing is that we can give read-only copies of this software to the townships that respond on mutual aid. So they'll have all that information. Read-only, they can't change it, but they could access it. And also, the police department use the same tablets, and they would, on a, say, active shooter or burglary, something like that, they would have access to the real-time feeds on the cameras from those businesses or schools if they sign on to it, which would be a boon to them. Moving forward, turnout gear, we're looking at 8 sets of turnout gear, about 1/3 of the department, to upgrade those, and I'll be looking at doing that over the next 3 budgets to completely replace our gear as it wears out. The next thing is some high-angle rescue gear. It's not a lot. It's under $1,000. Just some of the things we have to replace ropes as they wear out, things like that. And then there's new technology coming online all the time. And I was just given a list by our instructor coordinator for that, of some things that he needs for the year. That's above and beyond what we normally buy. And the last thing is a cyanide detector. It's not a real big cost. It's only about $600, but it is something that we need. Basically, what that's used for is after we have a fire and the guys are mopping up, doing their overhaul, they have to be able to know when they can go off air and take their masks off, and whether they can safely breathe the air. And this hydrogen cyanide meter will measure that. And then we also have meters that measure oxygen and CO, things like that, so we can tell then whether the atmosphere is okay for them to be off their compressed air.
Chief, when talking about self-contained breathing apparatus, do you have the ability to recharge your own air tanks?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I would suggest that probably be, if you didn't, it would be something you'd want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. We actually share a system with Marquette Township. We have the compressor at our #1 fire station, and large 100-pound H cylinders there, and then they have a mobile trailer. And so they'll respond when we ask with the mobile trailer to fill on scene, and then they can refill all of theirs from the compressor that we have. So we basically split the cost of it at the time.
Excellent.
The next item would be line 775. That's under repair and maintenance for stations. We're looking at $3,500 for LED lighting upgrades and also motion sensors for the switches. Since this isn't getting done through JCI for the stations now, we'd like to upgrade to LED. We did have a company come in and they did an audit last year, and it would be about a 9-month return on investment, and it would be completely paid off. And that would be for both stations. And then $8,000 for 2 furnaces at station #1. As of right now, our apparatus bay where we park all the trucks has 1 furnace, and it needs 3, but 2 of them have been out of service for close to a year. We were kind of waiting to see again on the JCI contract, but since that part of it isn't being done on our stations, I did add it back into the budget. And that leaves $4,200 for what we normally have in there. That's a little bit lower than normal. We did have a contract with an outside company for things like paper towels in the bathrooms, mats when you walk in the door. We ended up canceling that contract, and we're actually doing that ourselves and providing it for a lot less than we were before. So we've saved a couple $1,000s a year by doing that. Those are the major changes from last year. There are some that fluctuated a little bit. Some have gone down. As I've seen, the experience change year over year, I've been trying to reduce. It's not a lot, but 1,000 here, 1,000 there on line items, trying to get it to what we actually spend. The one thing that we did see on utilities, we had a bump up in our water. And all that is actually is that we had a defective water meter at our station number 2 for years, I guess, and we weren't being charged. So that's why that went up quite a bit. It went up from normally around 2,500 to 4,200. Yeah.
I would suggest we need a bulletproof vest for Gary when Johnson Controls puts the other meters in as well.
And then if there's any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer them.
What vehicles do you rent?
Those would be the fire trucks. All that's through the motor pool. So that amount of money is our cost for using the vehicles, I guess. It would be it would be all of our fire trucks plus my fire chief's vehicle, the fire inspector's vehicle, and our pickup.
So the city owns it, but you just have to pay into the motor pool.
Correct. It's kind of like what they do with the technology fee. We're basically renting them from motor pool is the, for the budget.
All the city vehicles and equipment and user departments pay rent to the motor pool. And through the motor pool, they take care of all the maintenance and replacement of vehicles.
When do you need another new big truck?
It's in the CIP for, I believe, 4 years from now, 4 and 5 years for the 2 frontline pumpers. And at that point, they'll be 20 years old, and I'm hoping they make it that long.
And one truck costs today how much?
About $750,000, somewhere in there. And then we're about 10 years out on our aerial ladder. We just refurbished that this year. That's 20 years old. We're going to try and push that one to 30 years. It doesn't get the same amount of use as our 2 frontline pumpers, so we shouldn't have any problem making it to 30 years on that one. But that'll be about 10 years out from now to replace.
You don't ever buy used trucks.
Generally, that's something the motor pool can probably answer better, but from what they've told us, it really doesn't save anything. Because by the time they sell them used, they're so broken down that the reason they're selling them is they can't maintain them. Any other questions on this page? Okay, moving on to rental code enforcement, page 81. On the applicable revenue, there are going to be some changes. The year-end estimate, again, it's a little bit of I'm putting an estimate down. It's probably not going to be even close because of all the changes to the rental code this year. The fees changed. I'm not really sure on numbers, things like that. It's all kind of up in the air right now. I'll have a lot better idea on what we're going to see over time for next year. So it's hard for me to, when we look down at the 2018 requested for what we're actually going to bring in, honestly, it's hard to say. I put down basically what our estimate was for this year. I don't know whether it's probably going to be higher because our registration fees are higher. So I would assume, but again though, it depends on how many new registrations we're getting to and how many more. At some point, we're going to reach a saturation level with long-term and short-term. So it's anyone's guess where that's going to end up. But on the revenue side, the one thing that we are seeing, there's a 0 there for fines for this year, and we have written citations. What's happening more often now is, and obviously it's happened 100% of the time so far this year, is that when we write a citation, people aren't paying them. And so we rewrite them and they get sent to the court. And then when they go to court, the court gets the fine. So we get 0. And that's just the way it works. So that's why there's a 0 there. It's not that we're not having to fine people, which would obviously be nice, but it's just that more people are pushing it to the court level and we don't see that fine then.
Airbnbs, how are the applications going number-wise?
Right now, total for the short-term registrations, we're about 110 to 120. So about halfway to the cap.
And we don't know what the state's gonna do on that yet, but We have 200, right? Isn't ours 200?
I thought it was 250.
Pardon me?
Yeah. Yeah, 250 is the total. We're about halfway to the total.
Any questions about blocks and proximity one to the other?
We get them daily. And
Pardon me?
are you asking if we're getting questions from people?
Well, I assume you're getting questions, but have we had to say no because somebody's got one next door or something?
It's very early in the process, not that I know of, but we just got to the point where we're fully going through everything with the mapping and zoning as of August 1. So it's very early in the process, but I haven't heard of any so far coming back. And I'm sure I'll hear about it if there is, so.
As we discussed the short-term rental process, you had brought up, or somebody had, I think it was you, that looked at a software system that would allow us to find those that are trying to go do this undercover. Would that be in this budget, or would it come out of some other department's budget?
Ankowitz said that, did he? I think it was Dennis who said they had software.
Yeah,
Couldn't find their software
I mean, it was
available to do
certainly
that.
something we talked about during the process. Is that
Yeah.
is that on the horizon?
Yeah, we've actually already contracted with them. We have actually our first training with them next week.
So that would be in the current budget rather
Correct.
than in the, is there, I mean, there's got to be a maintenance fee on that software or something like that.
Yeah.
But that shows up in the technology fee or something like that. Is that what?
I think I just recently saw that come through the accounts payable. I think it was a $3,300 expense. And do you know where it was charged to? I don't remember. Right.
I'd have to look, but honestly, I think I charged that through my fire budget because I had available funds and it needed to get paid for. Honestly, I think that's where it got charged to.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
I'll have to look and, yeah.
Typically
that
what-
might-
yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Typically what we do with the IT budget, like because this was an unforeseen thing, usually that first year we have that particular department pick up the expense. And then IT will later pick that up and charge that out.
Because, I mean, that would be a cost that we could charge as part of the fee for the inspection.
It
Or
is.
couldn't it? I mean,
It is. When we get to the fee schedule, when we adopted the changes to the rental code, we moved the fees from $35 and to they went up long-term to $110 and for the short-term to $175. And the difference between the $110 and $175, part of that is paying for that compliance software
thank you. Yeah,
on the
okay.
registration fee.
Thank you.
Okay, page 82. Really, there's not a lot of changes. If you have any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer them, but there really aren't many changes this year.
You know, this is an observation. We don't know as a commission, for example, and it'd be interesting if we could ask Airbnb what the utilization is of the Airbnb in the community. I know that on the 4th of July and things of that nature, if it wasn't for Airbnb, people would have had to stay in other communities. It would have been interesting if we could somehow find that data, but, well, you know.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Would also, yeah, in the Michigan Municipal League seminar that we had a couple months ago, most of the Michigan Municipal League people said they stayed at an Airbnb.
Yes.
So it would be very interesting to see what those numbers would be for us.
But how would you do?
I mean,
Well,
How do you give?
I would,
well, Airbnb keeps a record of everybody who stays. They have some data, and I don't know what,
Did they share that?
well, I mean,
I would think that would be the first step to.
well, the big cities have negotiated contracts with Airbnb. They've gone in and said, you're not gonna come unless you give us this information, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so.
Yes, Mike.
As we read, or as I did some research looking at this ordinance, Airbnb is very, they play their cards very close to the vest. They don't like to tell you how many rentals. And then you'd have the problem of, you know, you have independent that aren't Airbnb that are going to, or their VRBO or their HomeAway or something like that. You couldn't keep track of them all. So I don't think we're ever going to get real numbers or numbers that we can trust.
Data.
Okay, if there are any more questions, the next one is gonna be the waterfront safety at page 100. And I don't really have any, comments on the first two pages, 100 and 101, except to say that the estimates for the beach usage, were based on about 5 days this spring. From when I had to have my numbers in, so those aren't accurate. Your best numbers are gonna be the fiscal year 2016 of what we actually saw. And we'll have to wait until after this year to see what we're looking at for Clark's Park for attendance. And if you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them.
So if we wanted to say, what is our recreation budget, this could be charged to a recreation budget.
Sure. Yes, it could be. Right now, it's under the jurisdiction of the fire department. When Chief Belt was here, he was the one who spearheaded it, so we just kept it under his domain.
Cold. Look at the water temperature, the air temperature.
I have a question.
Yes.
Has it been easier to find lifeguards, or are we still having a problem?
Yeah, we found what we needed for this year. We did need extra because of Clark Park. So we generally would try to get 23 to 24. This year we needed at least 30. They're not obviously, the only increase really in the cost was the couple of the positions per day for Clark Park. But to be able, especially with college and high school kids and their schedules, we need extra, but it doesn't cost us any extra really to have them available. It's the total hours they're working on the beach, which wouldn't change except for that addition of Clark Park. We upped the starting pay, one pay level, and to try to get more people in, to take the job, and it worked. We did get what we needed. As usual, this time of year, within the next 2 weeks, we're going to have some firefighters covering shifts because they're all leaving for school. So we don't have enough, and it happens every year. But we did start off with, I believe, 31 total, not including the head lifeguard. So we did have enough to fully staff the beaches. And then and I'll have a better idea again next year, once we have a full year of operating Clark Park, what the overall funding for wages needs to be. This is kind of a feeling out year since it's the first full year that we have it open. But I should be able to adjust that hopefully down next year for next year's budget when we meet the next time. Okay, next would be page 102. The only change of note is line 801 under professional and contractual. Jumped up from about $750 to close to $2,000. What that is, it's the Red Cross lifeguard certifications for waterfront safety, CPR, things like that. They raised their rates quite a bit this year, and that's the only reason it went up. Okay, if there's no questions, the last one is going to be back to page 27, which is our fee schedule. First thing of note is going to be the fifth line down, which is non-resident vehicle fires. Those are charged at $119 an hour. And if you look down the page, there's quite a few more that are an hourly rate. All of those were moved up to $121 per hour, and that reflects a 2% increase in the firefighters' wages. Those are based on 1 truck and 4 firefighters. The next one down, foam replacement, Class A and Class B foam. I'm not sure where the original numbers came from. Those were before I came into the position. I priced them out. Class A went down, Class B went up. So I wanted to put the actual cost in here. And then application of foam, the average went up $1 per gallon. The bonfire permit, we've always charged $25. That I dropped that down to $10. That more closely relates to what it costs us to process the form, to process the permit. And then if you go all the way down to public assembly overcapacity, it's currently set at $600. That was raised last year. The problem that we've been running into is we'll have businesses over capacity, bars, restaurants, and then if we go in there and we find them, it was $150. And they made that by being over capacity in about 2 minutes. So there really wasn't any deterrent factor there. So we raised it to $600. What I'd like to do is even that out at $1,000, and that'll bring that in line with the rental code violation for overcapacity also, which has already been set at $1,000. And that basically, again, is just a deterrent to keep them from having too many people in the establishments for the exits if there's an emergency, so that they're not overcrowded. The next one, as we talked about, is the rental properties. Long-term rental registration is from $35 to $110, and the short-term rental from $35 to $175. Between our department and zoning, we looked at all the different steps through the registration process and what the actual costs were, as we did for all of the other fees, and those are what we came up with, the 110 and the 175. And again, the difference between the two is in the cost of the compliance software and also the cost for zoning to do the mapping of the short-term properties. And that would be the last change on there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Question for the city attorney. Our overcapacity charge is labeled a fee, but our cost is $44. Can we do that, or do we need to label it a fine? Is there a difference? And are we going to be able to continue that under, the Bolt or related decision?
It really isn't the nature of a fine. Because it was a fee, it's a suggestion that you can be over capacity if you just pay a fee.
So it's
it really isn't the nature of a fine, no matter what you call it. I mean, I think that's what Ian's talking about, aren't you? You fine them $600.
And we did talk about this last year when we raised it to $600. That if you look underneath it, we also have our general rental code violations and general fire and life safety code violations. It's the same thing. It is a fine.
Is it a citation of some kind?
Correct. It's a citation.
So that's how I don't want to, I'm in favor of this. I don't want to see it get thrown out because somebody says, well, your cost is only $44.
Yeah, I understand completely, but that suggests that you can do it if you just pay the fee.
So should we label it a fine? Would that be your advice?
I would label it the way we label our other civil infractions. And if they're labeled as fines, then I would label it that way.
Yeah, those actually just say violations. And then the wording in here is public assembly overcapacity. And I can just put violation after that. I can change it to that if that'll work.
I don't know what our civil infraction fine list looks like or how it's, what it's called, but it seemed like it would be in line with that.
Also don't want to see the courts get it instead of us.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, that's true.
And actually with that process, they still can. If the person doesn't pay it, and because we originally write it as a notice of violation, and then if they don't pay it to the city, then we have to rewrite it as a civil infraction citation, CIC, and then it goes to the court. So even on this one, if it goes to the court and they uphold that fine, we don't see the money.
I can't speak for the fire department, but I would say the vast majority of fines are paid here at City Hall through the notice of violation. Every once in a while, we'll get one that I have to attend in district court, but they're few and far between. Now, like I said, I can't speak for the fire department. Most of the ones I see are zoning violations and things of that nature. Maybe citations under the police powers.
Chief, when you look at the long-term rental fees and the short-term rental fees, that's for 3 years, is that correct?
No, that's one time only.
One time only?
That is only to register.
I see.
That's to go through the registration process. Once you're registered for as long as you own the building. The only thing that is reoccurring is the, just underneath that, the $63 an hour for the compliance inspection, and that's every 3 years.
That's every 3 years,
Correct.
okay.
There's no other questions, that's all I, oh, sorry.
Just a comment, I'm in favor of the fine, or the, whatever we're gonna call it, for overcapacity. I mean, this is something that I deal with all the time at the auditorium, and it's usually a problem with school groups, because they, you know, they wanna put 2 concerts back to back, too many parents are in the audience, they're littered down the aisles, and it's like, I need something to hold them to kind of, you know, think a little more differently about how some of those assemblies are put together. It has been in the past that artistic merit is more important than safety or where people are sitting, and maybe
Kids counted half people.
yeah, maybe that's what they're thinking. But, I would like to continue to get a tighter control on that, because if you think about if something did happen and 800 people have to move out of an old auditorium, it's, yeah. So maybe I can work with you a little bit more on how we can communicate this. Because I know the police department bills us for call-outs when we set off school alarms, so.
First 3 first.
Oh, okay. It's a deal.
Thank you.
Before we move along, I'd just like to bring up the remaining schedule for anybody who might be watching on TV. But next Monday night, August 21st, starting at 5:15, will be community services, which includes arts and culture, promotional, parks and rec, senior services, tourist park, marinas, and Lakeview Arena. Then the third session will be the following Wednesday, August 23rd, which will be at 3 o'clock. And that will be community development, which is engineering, planning and zoning, and also public works and utilities. And then the last scheduled budget session will be Wednesday, August 30th at 5:15. And that's the more the component unit type things for the city, the library, DDA, Brownfield, LDFA. And also there are 2 presentations which normally would have happened tonight, but due to schedule conflicts, we had to move them, and that will be the IT portion and also the police department and their portion. And then we hope to have a public hearing on September 11th, so the public will again have a chance to speak, and that will be, again, September 11th at 6 o'clock on the budget.
Okay, that's it. Public comment, we're gonna open it, close it. Commissioner Conley, you had something?
I was going to congratulate the one member of the public who showed up, but he left early.
Okay, we've just opened public comment. There's nobody to comments. We're gonna close it. Comments from the commission. Commissioner Plord, anything?
No, good job again, Gary. Everything is clear, easy to see, and this should be a pretty efficient process.
Commissioner Conley?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Baldini?
No.
Commissioner Cambenzi? Mayor, no. City manager? We're adjourned.